I will not.
With that, good morning. Welcome everyone to another fine hearing of the General Law Subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee. We have two bills on our agenda today, Senate Bill 631 and Senate Bill 472. We'll start with Senate Bill 631. The first person has indicated they wish to speak is the Honorable Mr. Secretary Mark Hammond. Mr. Secretary, we'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. Thank you for all of your hard work, and thank you for what you do. I'm going to be brief. We have a lot of people that would like to testify concerning this legislation. I am in support of this legislation. We've worked on this for several years now, and I would like to thank my electronic notary task force. Many of those individuals speaking today was a part of that task force, and we worked closely with them to help craft this legislation. We want a good piece of legislation that's going to benefit our state, and we feel like in the Secretary of State's office, as well as the task force, that this is a natural progression for the state of South Carolina concerning notarization. And e-notarization is what we need to do next to stay competitive with other states. Currently, 37 other states have some form of e-notarization, and a lot of states that was very beneficial for them during COVID, where they could still work out arrangements where very important documents could be signed and be notarized. Also, this is a natural progression to other pieces of legislation that we have passed over the years. I was part of the 2004 UETA, the Uniform Electronic Transaction Act, which opened the door for these types of signatures, e-signature, in the state of South Carolina. We wrote the legislation for non-governmental entities to be able to adopt e-signature. Also, UPERA, which deals with the Register of Deeds. We chaired that committee that wrote the regulations to open the door for a lot of electronic filings into our Register of Deeds through UPERA. So we feel like this will be more secure than a wet signature. The only real difference between a e-notarization and the current notarization is the wet signature. This signature would be electronic. The e-notary would have to be a notary approved by the delegation, the normal way that they are currently commissioned as a notary. Then you could apply to become an e-notary. We will promulgate those regs. There'll be additional training to become an e-notary for South Carolina. And once you're an e-notary, we will enroll you in the Secretary of State, and you will have a specific ID number so that we will know that you are an e-notary, and that e-notary commission will run alongside the current notary commission. So if you sign up as a notary and then an e-notary, you would be both for 10 years. If you have been a notary for 5 years and then decide to be an e-notary, then at the end of the 5 years, when you want to become or be a notary again, or renew your notary, then you would have to, then you'd be both for the next 10 years. We feel like this is going to be a legislation that's very beneficial for real estate transactions, deeds, mortgages, liens, releases, home equity loans, and auto registration documents. The notary, e-notary will still have to be present. You'll still have the attorney or and the customer. They'll all be in the same room, but instead of, again, the wet signature, you would be able to do this electronically. It would be in, say, on a computer in some type of form, and say at the end of if it's a closing, then you can take that and electronically send that to the Register of Deeds. So you wouldn't have to mail it. You wouldn't have to go to the courthouse. You wouldn't. So that's why we believe that it would be much more secure. So those are just some highlights. There's much more to the legislation. At this time, I'd like to ask my Deputy Secretary of State, Melissa Dunlap, if she would, to give a few more details about what we would like to inform the committee of and answer any questions you may have.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for making the time to be here and all the work that you're doing in the Secretary of State's office. As I mentioned to you the other day when I saw you, very proud of all the achievements that your office has achieved. Be happy to hear from Ms. Dunlap. And if any of the members of the committee have questions for the Secretary, we'll try and shoot them both at the same time at the conclusion of Ms. Dunlap's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'll be brief. Secretary Hammond has already hit a lot of the highlights of the bill. What I would like to say is all of you know that notaries play a very important role in our state in the prevention of fraud. And this simply gives the notary public another tool in providing their notarial service to an individual. And this is not remote notary, which you may have been familiar with previous legislation that was introduced where the remote notary and the notary and the signer were not in the same place, in the physical presence of one another. This is not what that is. This is simply a tool to allow the electronic notarization. As Secretary Hammond testified, electronic signatures are already existing law. This simply would provide that if the notary and the signer are together and you have a digital form, the notary can sign, the person would sign digitally, the notary would also sign and affix not only a digital seal, which will look very much like the seal that you see for a current notary. That will be a part of it. But what makes this even more secure when you talk about security, you're not mailing documents back and forth, but also behind the scenes, what you don't see is what's called a digital certificate. And that way, if anything ever comes up about, has this ever been tampered with, you've got that digital certificate behind the scenes that shows the documents haven't been tampered with. Mr. Hammond indicated that the notary public, an existing paper notary public that's already been approved by the legislative delegation could sign up. We'd have an application process, and they would be assigned a unique number. In addition, if a notary decides they want to provide electronic notarization services, they also have to let us know what vendor they plan to use. If they use a vendor to provide the electronic signature, and any vendor that wants to provide this service, they have to register as well. So we know this is something that's going to be, as Mr. Hammond indicated, this is the next step, and then we will go forward with promulgating rules with the General Assembly and look forward to doing that to put anything more detailed than what's currently in the legislation to address any concerns. But again, this is just one more tool. It's an optional tool. Notaries do not have to do this, but with COVID, everything else you've seen, and just technology in general, we are really behind the times if we cannot at least allow electronic notarization of signatures. And we just would greatly appreciate your support of the legislation. We want to help the business community. We want to help the legal community. We want to help citizens, individuals trying to complete. Maybe they want to send a form over to DMV and it needs to be notarized, and it can be electronically submitted. Let's help move business forward, and that's why we've been working so hard with taking us forward on options for our our notarization process in South Carolina. And as Secretary Hammond said, we have several task force members with us, and also we are happy to address any concerns you might have. And I just appreciate the opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes about it.
Thank you, ma'am. Representative Collins.
And thank you, Ms. Dunlap. And
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure that I completely understand. Would a notary be able to watch a person on Zoom complete the DMV form and both of us sign, the notary sign and the person sign at the same time?
You have to be in the physical presence.
Has to be in the
Yes,
physical
sir.
presence.
It has to be the physical presence. This is in what's called in-person, you might have heard of the term IPEN. It's in-person electronic notarization. So you have to be you have to be in the physical presence. This is IPEN. Yes,
Thank you.
sir.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Great. Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you very
Dunlap.
much. I appreciate it.
Appreciate your work and you being here. The next person who signed up to speak on this bill is Cynthia Blair. Ms. Blair, committee be happy to hear from you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. My name is Cynthia Blair. I'm an attorney with the law firm Blair, Cato, Pickering, Casterline. We're primarily a real estate law firm with offices in Columbia, Lexington, and Greenville. We are very much in favor of this bill. Currently, the way the process works. When you have a loan transaction, of course, the consumer comes in to sign the documents. We would notarize them, but then the paper documents have to then be put through, scanned in, and if we're in an electronic recording county, then we scan them and electronically record them. If they're not, we have to send them to the county. We then have to put all of the documents into a FedEx and hope, against hope, that they make it to the lender, back to the lender, for them to hold the loan documents. This process would obviously make this a much easier process. We would be able to electronically notarize the documents, submit them immediately to the county for recordation, and then submit them directly back to the lender, assuming the lender is ready, is electronic vault ready, which is something on the lending side. We would be able to electronically submit them back to the lender, so there'd be an immediate receipt by the lender. There wouldn't be any, a FedEx issue. And anytime there's bad weather, anytime there's any kind of issue, we have problems with FedEx and UPS, overnight delivery services. So this would do away with that issue. We'd be able to immediately submit the consumer's loan documents. It's much more secure. They wouldn't have to worry about those documents getting lost or anything like that. So we're very much in favor of this. Would love to see the support of this committee in moving this legislation forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any for me.
Thank you very much. Any members of the subcommittee have any questions? Also, I should acknowledge Representative Wes Cox, who's joined us this morning. Glad that you had nothing better to do. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Blair. I appreciate you making the time to be with us as well. Next on our list today is Mr. Neil Rashley. Neil will be happy to hear from you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Neil Rashley. I'm counsel with the South Carolina Bankers Association. I'll also try to keep mine brief also. I think all the points that have been said substantively about the bill, we're certainly very supportive of it. I've been working with this task force now. I should point out, for those of you who are not familiar with this bill has been around for 3 years, or the idea of adopting electronic notaries in South Carolina, and we've probably been working on it for 4 or 5 years as a task force. So yes, we do support it. Ms. Blair articulated many of the benefits that particularly in the lending industry and in closings you would get from electronic notary. Speaking to the legislative point, if I may just for a minute, Mr. Chairman, last year I think we may have been in front of this subcommittee or one similar to it in House Judiciary, as Ms. Durham mentioned, or not Ms. Durham, but Ms. Dunlap mentioned, we had a combined bill of remote online and electronic notaries. There were some concerns about remote online, certainly understandable, and the bill did not move forward, but there were open discussions. This happened to be right before COVID shut everything down. What if we amend the bill, take remote online out, and just leave electronic notary? The reason being is that in all these years of working on this bill, I certainly have never heard one person, legislator or other person, step forward and say they have a problem with electronic notaries. This part of that bill has always been a good part. We're very encouraged that the legislature has decided to have a subcommittee hearing this morning on it, and we're certainly very supportive of it, and we just would ask that the subcommittee move it out favorably, and hopefully we can get the bill moved at some point. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any members have any questions? With the exception of your comment with respect to another subcommittee being even similar to this one, definitely appreciate your comments. Thanks to the talents of Mr. Collins, Mr. Bailey, and Ms. Hennigan. Our analytical talents far exceed any of that of our colleagues here on the Judiciary Committee.
I have to be judicious.
I appreciate you being here. Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Let's see. Katie Titus from the Chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Katie Titus with the State Chamber of Commerce, and just want to echo very briefly all the comments that have been made prior to this. We are very supportive. One of our priorities, especially coming out of COVID, has been adapting to new and more efficient ways of doing business. It's good for consumers, it's good for our companies, and this is certainly a step in the right direction toward that. So thank you for the subcommittee's attention. Happy to take any questions.
Questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thanks,
your
sir.
support and being here. Ms. Callie Turner joins us virtually. Callie, we'd be happy to hear from you as well.
Thank you. Now I'll unmute myself. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hi, I'm Callie Turner with the South Carolina Bar. We do support remote, not remote notary, we do support the e-notary bill. Mr. Rashley brought up the remote notary in his comments, and yes, that is something we oppose. We have worked with Ms. Dunlap and thank her for all her work in putting together a lot of the stakeholders and interested parties along the way on this bill. And we had added 2 amendments in the Senate that are in your draft, and we certainly want to keep those. One, it says this act does not apply to wills and trusts in South Carolina. And I brought along Billy Newsome here, who's an expert in probate law, and he can answer any questions about that. And the other thing we added was in Section 5 is nothing in this act will contravene South Carolina law that requires a licensed South Carolina attorney to supervise a real estate closing. So those were important to the bar. They're in there, and with those additions, we are certainly in support of this legislation. So if you have any questions for me or Mr. Newsome, we'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Turner. Appreciate your testimony this morning. Mr. Newsome, do you have anything you want to provide to the committee this morning?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm available to answer any questions anybody has. We proposed this amendment so that it did not apply to wills and trusts, just because South Carolina is a strict execution state, and we didn't want any unintended changes in the law with regard to execution of wills and trusts. And so we support this act, and I'm available to answer any specific questions anybody on the committee might have.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Newsome, Mrs. Turner? No. Anyone else here that wants to be heard with respect to Senate Bill 631? Seeing no one, then any discussion for the committee members? Seeing none, the pending question then will be a favorable report of Senate Bill 631. Roll call is required and ordered.
Chairman Caskey. Aye. Representative Bailey. Aye. Representative Collins. Aye. Representative Hennigan. Aye. Bill receives a favorable report.
Thank you all. Anybody here was here exclusively for that purpose, you're welcome to leave without engendering too much antipathy from us. I know you have breakfast to eat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The next bill on our agenda is Senate Bill 472, the Responsible Alcohol Server Training Act. The first person who has indicated they wish to speak. Sorry, Representative Finley, I didn't see you there on your quadricycle scooter thing, but we'd be happy to hear from you if you want to wheel yourself to the center podium.
It's always so sad when power goes to someone's head. But, picking on those less fortunate and less able.
See what I have?
Yeah, I get it.
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to hear from you.
We all have our little gifts, Mr. Chairman.
Only for the next 45 minutes.
Yes, sir. So this bill, server training, has been bandied around for the better part of 3 or 4 years. The argument has always been this is designed to make training at restaurants more efficient, but not create an additional cause of liability for restaurants. You may not realize this, but for small businesses, especially small restaurants with alcohol licenses, the cost of liability insurance keeps going up. And I'm for training. What I have grave concerns about is whether this bill creates an additional cause of liability. Went to staff, including the Speaker's office, trying to get some language that, because I have been assured by the Senate and all the groups involved that this is not anything other than an attempt to train, not create liability. And I've got an amendment that I would love for y'all to consider. And all it says is this act shall not be interpreted to create any new or additional causes of action against a permittee. It is the intent of the General Assembly that the civil and criminal penalties contained in the act be the full extent of civil or criminal liability for noncompliance by a permittee. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if people need copies of that, but I've got them.
Yes, sir. If you wouldn't mind, pass those up. What I'd like to do initially, though, is take the testimony of the individuals who've also indicated they want to speak, and then we'll take up that amendment. Mr. Finley, if that suits.
Is it all right with you? I've got a high school
You're still competing in high school sports?
No, sir. I've never competed in high school sports, but that's my.
Yeah, no, it's perfectly fine. I appreciate it.
I'm now going to wheel over to the block and get mocked by Ms. Bernstein for being late.
Well,
So if it's all right with you, I will return to the best of my ability.
all right. Thank you. Yeah, that's,
I'm wheeling off.
thank you. Pull it together. All right. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay. The next person who's indicated they would speak, Stephen Burritt. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Yes, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Stephen Burritt. I'm the Regional Executive Director from Others Against Drunk Driving in South Carolina and North Carolina. Wanted to express our support for this bill. As bad as our DUI situation in South Carolina, we should be considering every measure that could have positive impact, and we do think this is one. Research tells us that generally about 50% of DUI arrests or crashes stem from somebody leaving an establishment where alcohol is sold. So anything we could do to curtail negative incidents that come out of those sort of places, we think could have a real overall positive impact on the situation. And certainly would like to give the opportunity for that to work. I will mention that prior to my 8 years at MAD, for the 12 years before that, actually was a contractor with the Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services, and one of the tasks I actually oversaw was when they began the relationship with the Department of Revenue, where if a new program curriculum was submitted, DEODAS would kind of pull together the experts. I was actually the one that put together the initial criteria to review those and was a part of most of the first few reviews. And I can tell you that some of the programs we reviewed were quite good, and some of them were really bad. Like 20 PowerPoint slides. It was a relatively major chain. Not taught in person, not even narrated. Just we give these 20 PowerPoint slides, and that's our alcohol education to our people working. So, left to just the best judgment of each individual establishment, I don't think we're across the board getting good quality education that teaches them how to refuse a sale, recognize signs and symptoms of intoxication, recognize a fake ID, and to know what the penalties are if they sell, just to name a few things. So I think some standardized training, knowing that everybody's been through that. We certainly certify people for a lot less potentially risky behaviors in this state. So knowing what over-service of alcohol can do, sales to minors can do, this seems like a very reasonable expectation to know that those who have that job have gone through some sort of education. So just wanted to make that statement on our behalf, and we appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate you working and your time this morning.
Thank you, sir.
Well, yes, sir. Any members have any questions? Mr. Burritt? Okay. Next person on our list is Mr. Gary Turner. Mr. Turner, we'd be happy to hear from you this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Gary Turner. I'm with DOR, and we've been following this legislation for a good while. We've had input into it. Of course, DOR will be responsible for doing a good bit of this work. And we just want to let you know we're fine with it, and we look forward to implementing the program. Did have one small question come up, and the bill allows us to charge the provider of the programs up to $500 per year. The question is, there's 32 county providers, and the bill exempts state agency providers, but it's unclear as to whether the county should be exempt. And just wanted to point that out and see if, maybe y'all might want to address that.
Certainly appreciate you pointing that out. I'll ask staff to take a look at that if this bill should pass out with a favorable report. But perhaps we'll have an amendment that will clarify that before we take it up in the full committee. That's good.
Any questions?
Okay. Any questions so far? Thank you. Appreciate your work, and certainly appreciate you pointing that out to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Linda Cousins. Ms. Cousins, we'd be happy to hear from you this morning as well.
Mr. Chairman and subcommittee members, I am Linda Cousins, and I'm an attorney from Greenville. I am the individual who asked for S.472, the Responsible Alcohol Server Training Act, to be filed. Prior versions of this bill, filed in previous legislative sessions, were nicknamed Allie's Law in memory of my deceased child, Allie, who died in a one-car crash. A bartender served her alcohol without asking to see her ID and overserved her. Allie was my only child. This bill is the same bill as Senate Bill 342, which passed the Senate and got to the House floor in the last legislative session. The House Legislative Oversight Committee, in its study on DeOtis, did recommend alcohol server training legislation for on-premise consumption establishments, and this bill is such legislation. Studies have shown the effectiveness of alcohol server training in the reduction of sales to underage and/or intoxicated persons. Studies have also shown the effectiveness of server training in reducing DUI crashes and DUIs. South Carolina usually ranks as one of the worst states for drunk driving deaths. For public safety and public health reasons, we need to require alcohol server training at restaurants and bars. S.472 is the General Assembly's opportunity to address South Carolina's underage drinking problem, the DUI fatality rate, and the problems that occur when underage or intoxicated patrons leave bars and restaurants. South Carolina presently requires alcohol server training for breweries and for sellers who are convicted of selling alcohol to underage persons. This bill will expand the training requirement to restaurants and bars. S.472 is a bill that can become a life-saving law, and I do ask that you seriously consider voting in favor of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'll answer any questions should you have any.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for being here. Of course, we extend our condolences to you for your loss, and also recognize you for your hard work over the years in moving this legislation forward. Do any members of the subcommittee have any questions for Ms. Cousins? No. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I think that's everyone who's signed up on our list. Is there anyone else who's here that wants to testify with respect to Senate Bill 472? All right. And then I understand, Mr. Bailey, you have an amendment? Yes, if you hit the button so we can, the millions of people listening online will be able to hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment that was alluded to earlier by Representative Kirkland, I'd like to amend this bill to assure that it's not interpreted to have any additional civil causes of action to the permittee, and also to make sure that the intent of the legislation is clear.
Any discussion or questions? None? Then the question is adoption of the Bailey Amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The Bailey Amendment is added or adopted to Senate Bill 472. Any discussion then on the bill as amended? Pending question is favorable report to Senate Bill 472. Roll call is required and ordered.
Chairman Caskey.
Aye.
Representative Bailey. Aye. Representative Collins. Aye. Representative Hennigan. Aye. The bill is favorable as amended.
With no further items on our agenda this morning, the committee will stand adjourned. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate everybody making time to be here this morning. Thank you.